So hi, Dan. It is super nice to have you here with us at Watchdogs.
Oh, hi. Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Anya. It's very it's an honor to be here.
I'm pretty sure that at this point, considering the international success of the film, you're used to all sorts of Q&As, and hopefully we can at least infuse this one with maybe slightly local flavors, Polish flavors that you might be able to respond to, or not. We'll see.
Definitely. Well, I hope so. My family is originally, well, part of my family came from Poland, so I have a strong affinity with the country.
So I mean, I hope that people who are watching our Q&A know something about the film. I'll try and maybe briefly summarize the film, because the film itself is sort of an artistic documentation of a process that you were a creator of and a part of for several years. Bank Job, which is also the title of the film, was the name of the project, and the idea was, now we'll see if I got it right, to buy debt from people who are indebted. Is this how you say that? And to do that, you made some sort of a activism move and printed money. And I mean, it's getting really complicated because I think debts are complicated, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, you're kind of like, you've definitely got some of the building blocks of what happens, but I'll just try and explain it, from my perspective, and that might make it slightly less confusing to you, I'm hoping. So first of all, what happens is that debt gets traded on the secondary market. So that sounds complicated and very financial and, all the rest of it. But what it actually means is that, like, if you have a debt, and you're like, say you owe 1,000 euros, let's say, to a bank, and you don't pay it and you default on that debt, what happens is that, like, after a certain amount of time, the bank will just basically dispose of that debt. And if they don't think that you're going to pay it back, and you're not in contact and you're not paying a small bit back or whatever, they'll sell it off to someone else for less than the face value of the debt. So for instance, if you owed 1,000 euros, you didn't pay it, after about 3 or 4 months, the bank might sell it on for, say, 500 or 600 euros to someone else, to another company. And the company that buys that debt will probably buy up like 1,000 other people's debt all at the same time. What they then try to do is to contact you and make you pay the full amount of the debt, the face value, the 1,000, plus maybe interest as well. So then what happens is that a certain proportion of those people whose debt they have bought will start to pay them back bit by bit, but others won't, and they'll escape without necessarily paying anything. So then whoever it is that's bought that debt might then sell that on again. And if they do, they'll have to sell it again cheaper. And this goes on and on and on and on until the debt becomes worth only a fraction of what its face value was. So, for instance, the 1,000 euros that I'm imagining that you are escaping without paying might now only cost, another debt buying company. They might be able to buy it for 20 or 50 euros. Your 1,000 euro debt. But they'll still come after you for the full amount of that money. And that's basically how that secondary debt system works. And what we did was to basically buy up what would have been 1.2 million pounds worth of debt on its face value. We bought that for less than 20,000 pounds. And then instead of collecting on the debt, we blew it up. With an explosion. And the purpose of blowing that debt up and telling the story around it was just to kind of look at, how banks create money by making loans. And then also by looking at, like, what this kind of debt-fueled economic system is, that we're all living in, and to ask questions about it, and to also look at what drove the 2008 financial crisis and the forces which are still driving people into poverty the whole time and making some people very rich, but most people much more precarious and poor, you know, so pulling apart like the difference between those at the top and those at the bottom, you know. So I wanted to try and, you know, or we wanted to try and create like a story, you know, that could bring a lot of that's very abstract, but we wanted to try and create a story that could bring it to life, you know, in as visceral a way as possible. So that was where bank job came in, and we opened our own bank and we started printing our own money. And
beautiful money, by the way.
What's that?
Oh, it's beautiful money. Just wanted to say, I wish I had it on my wall, you know, as a piece of art, as I know some people do. But let me just keep on playing the dumb blonde, which hopefully I'm not. Because you even say that in the film at some point that you were taught, you know, pay your debt. What? So people don't pay up their debts. Why do you want to pay their debts? They should do it themselves. You know, it's not your job, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's what we're always told. And that is the basic kind of moral position, you know. So if you challenge that idea that, you know, debt is wrong or whatever, you're seen almost as a kind of a scoundrel, you know, someone that, you know, has no real moral core. But I suppose like what we're trying to talk about is the fact that that's quite a hypocritical view when you see that, you know, the banks that were at the right at the core of the financial crash of 2008, none of them paid their debts. You know, there was one banker was held accountable for that massive crash. And you also see these huge companies like, you know, who were avoiding paying their tax debt. You know, so we're really asking the question, why is it that the morality around debt is selective? You know, why is it that it's applied to the people at the bottom, but never to the people at the top? And that was really the core question that we were asking in the film. And we're saying that, you know, if the people at the top have been allowed off their debt or to renegotiate their debt, why can't the people at the bottom also be allowed to follow suit and to renegotiate their debt and cancel their debt? You know, and that's really what we're arguing for. And we're not only saying that for poorer people in Western Europe or America, also like whole states, you know, in the global South, who are massively in debt, but always have to pay back Wall Street or the City of London, you know, before they even repair their, you know, their infrastructure after hurricanes and stuff. So really, like this whole morality around debt needs to be updated to reflect what's really truly happening in the economic system. And that's what we were arguing, and that's what we continue to argue through the film and you know, and the new project that we're doing.
Because I think that after reading the synopsis, one could think that, you know, this is a charity project about poor relief. And this is also something else that you do talk about in the film, that this is a false assumption. It's super superficial, and that we just are completely unaware of the fact that debt economy is something that we are all a part of, even if ourselves, we do not owe any money to anyone. We are a part of the system. And I guess it's, you know, tightly related to the fact that people very often do not have any sort of economic education. They do not understand how it works. One of your protagonists also talks about that. And so I wanted to ask you, because you said that 85% of politicians, I'm not sure if that refers to British politicians or politicians in general, do not know where the money comes from. I think like Polish politicians have no idea about that either. So where does it come from? Well,
that was just a UK statistic that was, you know, found by Positive Money, which is a civil society organisation who ran a survey of UK politicians in 2017, I think, and they found that 85% didn't know how money was created by private banks, you know. And yeah, you're talking about economic education, and for most people, economic education consists of being told that they have to save money,
exactly,
that they have to make ends meet, and each month they have to da 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 da. but we were like trying to rip the veil off that and say, well, true economic education, should also be about learning, the sleight of hand, which is going on just underneath the surface, this idea that, it's okay to just kind of create avalanches of money, and to sort of pull the strings of a debt-based economy, but really it's always the fault of the people at the bottom when it collapses. It's kind of like this house of cards, which is continually being built and then collapsing and being built again. It's always the fault of the people, the borrowers, the people at the bottom. But I suppose we were trying to say, well, a true economic education should be looking at the entire system, and empowering people to understand how the system is working and how precarious it all really is, and how unfair it really is as well.
Obviously this film is a great lesson in economy, in a way, I think a very approachable one, but you also have chosen several, I'm not sure what their legal status is. It's either organizations or foundations that do things for the society, and they were the participants and the benefactors of this whole event that you created. And I wanted to ask you, first of all, how did you choose them? Because something I kept on thinking about when I was watching the film is that these are the entities that could potentially change this broken cycle that we are talking about, yet they are deeply underfinanced and completely unappreciated by the system that could benefit from their help. So that was like a paradoxical situation, I thought.
Like those. So we worked with four local organizations. One was a school, one was a youth project. We worked with a food bank and also a homeless kitchen. And when we raised our money by selling our artwork money, we split the proceeds between half of it we used to buy up the debt, the £1 million of debt for under 20,000. And the other half we gave to these organizations, £5,000 each. And I suppose, we were arguing that these organizations were like picking up the broken pieces of the financial system. They're helping people who have no other help at all, who shouldn't be in that situation. We're kind of outraged that they were in that situation. We certainly weren't arguing in favor of like the big society, as the Conservatives in Britain call it, which is the idea that we all help out and everything. We were much more arguing that there should be a just economic situation where people don't fall down beneath a certain level, which is the kind of safety net idea of a welfare system, which we deeply believe in. But we argue that that's been stripped away since the 1970s by the creditocracy. And I don't know how far those organizations have like a scalable solution to the economic problems which we have to face day in, day out, thanks to the creditocracy and the economic situation or system that we're in. But we certainly wanted to celebrate them as sort of really largely, kind of unpaid heroes whose lives are consumed by the fight to help people, in an extreme situation which they find themselves in and which they shouldn't be in. We would like, state to properly fund a welfare system so that they weren't in that situation in the first place. But and it was quite an honor to meet those people and to work closely with them and to help out a little bit. But we're certainly not arguing that charity is the way forward, because almost like the economic system can just carry on its own and we'll just pick up the pieces, using charitable institutions. It shouldn't be the case. There shouldn't be such extreme poverty. People, children shouldn't be having to walk to school with no shoes on. They shouldn't be hungry. Those are the sort of feelings that we have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I absolutely agree. One more thing I was curious about: how much do you think time is a problem in the world we are in? Because looking at how they operate, how they consistently talk about, you know, how short of funding they are, and the money they have at their disposal is getting smaller and smaller. They also said, I remember guys from Soul Project, I think, they said that if they could work with the kids and the youth they're working with consistently, and, you know, for a period of time long enough, many of the problems they're actually facing, they wouldn't have to face, because they wouldn't either. And it so sort of brings me back to the discussion, I think, around politics, that, you know, we keep on having those rapid changes, new ideas all the time, and there is no patience and sort of no collaboration, because everybody is just want to score a goal for their party, for their interest. And I know it sounds maybe idealistic, but after watching your film, I think you might be an idealist, just a little bit. How much do you think such systemic approach and actually thinking about collaborating could change, you know, the game, also the dead game? Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's amazing, you know, really amazing questions that you're asking. They're really deep, profound things, you know, and really important things to think about. You know, we believe now, you know, we're just, I mean, I'm a filmmaker, you know, a professional filmmaker. My partner Hilary is an artist, you know, and we're not superheroes of any kind. We're just normal people trying to muddle our way through and trying to live in a meaningful way, I suppose, and trying to live consciously. And what we have found, I guess, by doing Bank Job was that, like, by looking around and working together with people who are around us in our community, we can get together and you know, we have so much more power when we do get together. You know, none of us really has the solution on our own, but when we begin to collaborate, just like you said, all of a sudden this explosive energy sort of begins to form, you know, and something could just erupt, you know. And so now we're working together again with our community, and this time we're building a kind of distributed power station across the different rooftops of the borough where we live. And we're
still talking about Walthamstow, right?
Yeah, we're still living there, and so now we're sort of taking a lot of what we learned from Bank Job about working closely with different parties and collaborating and cooperating. Mm-hmm. And this time we're building a sort of grassroots Green New Deal, you know, which is what a lot of people on the left are talking about. We need a Green New Deal. We need lots and lots of investment. We need to create jobs and all of this. And yet at the same time, you have the mainstream political parties who are kind of saying that they want to solve the climate crisis, but actually not really taking the concrete measures that they need to. So we're saying, let's collaborate with people in our community around us and start to build, this green infrastructure from the grassroots up, you know, one solar panel at a time, you know, one house being insulated at a time. And maybe it's a little bit less sexy than blowing up £1 million of debt, on the one hand, but on the other, it's really quite amazing because we've got members, people who are helping fund it from all around Britain and America and all the rest of it. And it's deployable in any community. Anyone can start to follow these ideas and begin to do the same thing, and for me, hope comes from the grassroots, and
absolutely, yeah.
Let's hope that something will happen, where government from above will unleash like the kind of stimulus that we need to really transform our societies and our energy systems and our banking systems and everything. But at the same time, it's one thing to hope, but it's also kind of hopeless if that's your only strategy, So we like to try and empower ourselves and empower the people around us by taking strategies which we can employ and control as well, even if they happen to be quite small at first, but just to build one day at a time, one brick on top of the other, so we've taken the same method. And yeah, we are quite idealistic, but I don't think we're necessarily utopian, and we're quite practical in how we do things too. You know, and we try not to get totally lost inside of the because a lot of people who are activists, you know, they're so passionate and they believe so deeply in what they're doing, but they're also sort of harming themselves as well at the same time. They're unable to live in a sustainable way with their beliefs. You know, we try to mitigate that and make sure that we actually have a solid sort of basis on which to draw, you know, because we want to keep at it. You know, there's all sorts of activists going to prison in Britain now, you know, people who are taking action over here. So, you know, it's not an easy time for people trying to change the world, you know, but we try to keep practical and positive and, you know, strong if we can, you know, build on solid foundations.
You know, when you mentioned activists going to prison, I thought, you know, I think the whole discussion, and again, also about the economy, should be in some way based on trust. And I think the general problem we're having now is the relationship between the power and the people has no element of trust. I mean, we distrust, you know, our governments because either maybe like with the pandemic, they haven't given us all the information, they don't keep us updated as much as we'd like to. In other political cases, like in Poland right now, they're you know, having battles we do not fully understand, and it's all very, very detached in a way. And I have this feeling that sometimes it would just be so much better if you could just help people grow on their own, just providing, you know, a sufficient support system, but like not interfering. And obviously this is not a subject of your film, but just want to give you an example. I'm not sure if you're aware, but in Poland we have the lowest, I think it's called the natural demography, like the natural birth, the lowest birth rate since the Second World War right now, even though our government is doing a lot to invest. But one thing they're not doing is investing in people's sense of safety, stability, support, and trust. So, I mean, to me, it's a good example, you know, in a way. I'm not sure. I mean, this is not even like a proper question, but what do you think? Do you think the element of trust and understanding could, after everything you've seen, be again reintroduced in this delicate relationship between power and the people, or is it just completely out of the question at this point in time?
Well, it's a tough one because a lot of people, you know, that I know, and if you like, my allies, you know, my sort of the people, our political, you know, allies, I suppose, feel quite strongly that, you know, we've been betrayed once again by the political class. You know, for us, obviously, Britain is a totally different story from Poland, and you know, we've undergone in the last, you know, 5 years, you know, a huge shift, you know, in terms of our relationship with Europe, much of which was based on pure and utter lies, you know, from Brexiteers, and you know, supported by billionaire media moguls, you know, who published, you know, absolute nonsense, you know, and peddled it to the British people. So, you know, trust for us isn't, you know, is really broken, you know, and you see all sorts of effects of broken, you know, of trust being broken with political institutions, and also not just political institutions, just experts in general are seen to be untrustworthy. You know, people don't really know who to believe or where to turn, and I think they do feel very burned. And I think that the era where, you know, we had, I suppose, post Second World War, where we had you know, a movement in Britain, a sort of political movement, which was aiming to create, you know, equality, you know, with good houses, you know, healthcare for everyone, education, you know, good standard of education for all. those ideals basically have been forgotten about, or if not forgotten about by everyone, certainly suspected by many to be, pure hot air. And people are so angry. And I think that's what came out in the Brexit vote in Britain. And it boils down to the fact that they don't really know who the enemy is. They don't really know. They know they're being shafted, but they can't quite tell who is shafting them or what to do about it. That's kind of my sense of it. And so what we're doing is, I guess we're creating through our documentaries and and our projects, the new project and various other sort of information. What we're trying to do is to educate people around, the very basic thing of what is money, where does it come from, how does the way it's produced affect our relationships with each other and encode inequalities and all the rest of it, and therefore how can we, from that knowledge, how can we begin to think about improving those relationships that we have between ourselves and creating an economic system and a society which is more inclusive, and which is basically a little bit more kind, just trying to bring kindness back, I suppose, and to argue passionately for kindness, because a lot of people are telling us that human beings are just like, we all have our daggers raised and we're just, it's everyone for themselves type of thing. And I think that's where we've ended up, philosophically. I don't know if that answers your thing or if I'm just rambling along now.
No, I think it does. Although I think maybe I've watched too many war movies, but I think this idea that, we're there with the daggers ready to kill, if you actually could confront it with a real life situation, it would become apparent that actually sinking the dagger into somebody else's body is probably something that you could never do, and you just think you could, and you just think is that easy. So that's something that is giving me hope. But something very important that you're doing, I think in general, as we talked about trust and sense of safety, is creating a community, because if it's not something that you are given or something that you can just join, because obviously the sense of doing something together for the purpose of doing it together and creating that togetherness is not valued at the moment. So you're sort of taking your power back in this aspect, because at least for now, this is something that nobody has taken away from you. And I guess in doing that, you do find purpose, which is maybe the most valuable currency these days, because it's very hard to find it in this world, in this life. So how important is that, in Bank Job, but in general in what you're doing in your next project?
Yeah, I think purpose, when I suppose before Bank Job, I was kind of lost in a vacuum of sort of bullshit jobs, running around making films for anyone that would hire me, and dreaming of something else, but having no idea of how to make it real, if you like. And there was such a kind of feeling in my heart, of life has got to mean something more than this, and that was the feeling that I had as I went towards Bank Job. But I found at that point I was researching a lot of writers and thinkers, including Tolstoy, who wrote a book about art and life, and George Orwell, whose work I love. And then I found this survivor of the Holocaust, psychologist Viktor Frankl, who talked about meaning, logotherapy, as actually being the driving force of, the motivating factor for human beings, and his book, which was called Man's Search for Meaning, which, was a product of its time. It should have been Man and Women's Search for Meaning, our search for meaning, it could have even been. But that being like the primary motivating factor underpinning psychology, as opposed to pleasure, which I think Adler was saying it was, or what Freud talked about, which was that actually we were trying to accrue power during our lives, and that was the biggest psychological motivating factor. But I just could not help but, deeply agree with Frankl that actually the biggest, most important thing for all of us is to know our purpose, and what I liked about his book was that he said that, throughout our lives, our purpose changes. Life asks us questions, effectively, dramatic questions. How are you going to deal with this thing that's happened to you now, or, in your own life? So therefore, all of the purpose of all of our lives is different and is unique to us, and it changes as we live. But that listening to what that purpose is and embracing it is the only thing that we can do in order to live in alignment with who we actually are, and so I think it's incredibly important. But I also don't think that you should be trapped inside of any single purpose, whatever that might be, because I think that as we live, we have different purposes, so at one moment it might be to expose the secondary debt market and make a movie. At another, it might be to look after a sick relative. At another, it might be to make sure that the child that you've seen that has no shoes gets some shoes, or whatever. So we have these longer term and then these shorter term things that life is demanding that we attend to, if you like. So purpose for me is absolutely right at the core of everything. But you cannot just get lost and think that everything has to be political, because you can see what happens to people that just think that pursuing the political purpose is the only way, because they will end up being spat out and crushed by the machine and thrown away. So I think you also have to be able to look after, if you've got a family or whatever, you need to be able, that's part of your purpose, is to look after that family, so you have to be aware of like the rounded nature of these questions. That's what I think anyway.
I think one thing we can say for sure, even though the film we're showing at Watch Dogs is called Bank Job and it's about debt and money, you print a lot of it. And like I said before, it is really beautiful. It's a piece of art. The purpose of life is definitely not money. And so I think this is one conclusion that one can get from this movie for sure, even though I hope there were not too many people, starting to watch it with this assumption. But I mean, I think even though we've been living in the capitalism for such a long time now, we're still getting fooled by the idea, right? I think so. So I just wanted to thank you for the film, because I think it's little things like that, even though I'm not saying this is a little film, but it is like, gestures like that sort of debunk this huge balloon that's not really fun anymore. It's starting to really, really weigh heavily on us. Yeah.
I think it's difficult because when it comes to kind of financial systems, like, you've got, on the one hand, you've got capitalism, and we can all see that, that's not, we're burning up the natural capital of the actual world, and that's it. We've now come to the position where, that's clear to everyone, and so some people,
not everyone.
we're all faced with different, sort of decisions about how we deal with that. Some people are escaping into fantasies. Some, we're bargaining with the grief that's causing, I think, but it's becoming an inescapable fact that, the natural world is falling apart, by the over exploitation and by the industry, etc. So there is that, and yet, like at the same time, I don't think we've managed to imagine a viable, sustainable alternative yet. And I think that's that's kind of where we are. And there's an awful lot of suspicion about of the state, you know, and people always think that progressives who want to argue for a welfare system and a tighter-knit community in society are basically just trying to say, we want to control everyone, you know, and we want to bring in a communist system, you know, and many people, you know, have living memory of the terrors of communism. So
that's what's happening in Poland. This metaphor of anything, you know, being pro-community, being a communist bullshit is very, very alive still.
so within that like sort of black and white dichotomy, there's almost nowhere to go. You're just like, I'll just not think about it, put it under the rug. But you know, we have to, you know, we have no alternative but to think about it, you know, and just saying what you were saying, you know, money is important and it's fundamental to us, and our lives, the entire structure of our lives are effectively governed by, you know, what our financial status is, you know, so you cannot just say, oh, money's not the point of life and everything, and switch it all off. Actually, it kind of is. We all live lives which are fully sort of fleshed out by our financial status, and how we go about getting money is about how we spend our days, you know. So it's pretty important trying to figure it all out, you know, and I'm very interested. I remain interested in it. It's a philosophical, you know, conundrum, you know, and it's something that impacts us, you know, every single moment of the day almost. So yeah, I think it's complex.
I'm pretty sure we're not going to solve it during this conversation. I am also pretty convinced it might not happen during my lifetime, but I do remain hopeful. And I think it's time to wrap. So let me just remind all the people who've watched this Q&A who you are. And you are Dan Edelstyn, who's directed Bank Job, along with Hilary Powell, your wonderful companion and a great designer, by the way, because again, I'm saying that for the fourth time, but this money, I want it. We have very, very ugly notes in Poland. And I mean, I think right now, even worse than ever. So I wish to sort of copy this design and just, you know, take it.
Yeah, are you going to hire us to redesign the Polish banknotes?
That might happen in distant future, maybe in this reality where I'm president, so never, but thank you. Yes.
Give us a ring. You know where we are.
We'll call you, Dan.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, real pleasure. Really, really nice to meet you, Anya. And what was I going to say? It would be, have we now stopped this, or do we have to like?
I'll stop it now.
Okay, I would love